And the only beef I would get was, once a week in the form of a steak, ground up, fried on the grill, maybe add a little bit of bacon, sliced cheddar cheese, an egg, in between a nice broiled bun, some butter. I'm getting hungry, guys. Welcome to Vigorous Health. I'm Coach Steve, here to give you an update on this fasting mimicking diet that I've been doing for the last 4 weeks, and I will continue to do for another 2 weeks, and then I will schedule another ultrasound to see if my non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is finally resolved. Fingers crossed, because it's been a very lengthy journey, and fasting mimicking diet, even with pharmacology involved to promote fat loss and keep the appetite suppressed, it certainly hasn't been easy. Now, part of that is the reflection in the mirror, slowly seeing my muscle disappear. Now I'm only 89 kilos. 89 kilos this morning, or whatever pounds that is. It's probably less than 190 pounds at this point in time. And coming from a pretty heavy weight of 115 kilos or 255 pounds has been one hell of a roller coaster. I'll tell you that. So I switched to this fasting mimicking diet to get the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease under control. I tried, every supplementation known to man to help in the resolvement of NAFLD. I think the only mistake that I made is by coming off cycle and doing, selective estrogen receptor modulators for a 4-week period. Maybe that slowed down the resolvement. But considering that my total testosterone is was around 500 nanograms per deciliter before I started to do this fasting mimicking diet. And now it's a little bit lower, unfortunately. But I think that 500 nanograms per deciliter, for most of the time that I was coming off PEDs, I don't think hormone replacement would have made a significant difference, to be honest, keeping my total testosterone at the top of the reference range. So after doing every supplement known to man and basically everything right, besides coming off steroids, to resolve the NAFLD, it was only 50% resolved. One of the hepatologists said it was only 40% resolved. So I decided to get a little bit more extreme, go with a hardcore approach, a little bit more bodybuilder-like approach, and go on the lowest amount of caloric intake I could stomach, that being a fasting mimicking diet with vegetables only, restrict dietary fat intake to the lowest amount, coming from supplements and maybe a little bit of olives here and there, take the protein out, take all the direct carb sources out, and just go with the lowest amount of calories, again, I could stomach. Now, pharmacology was involved. I'm still taking GW1516, SR9009, a low dose of clenbuterol, liraglutide to keep my appetite under control, and 2 units of growth hormone, which I all think have, moderate effect on lipolysis in the body. And whether that comes from the stored body fat, intramuscular triglyceride stores, or intra-liver triglyceride stores, judging by the digression of my liver enzymes and my ferritin concentrations, we'll address that all in this video. I think I'm pretty much close to, the end stage of this journey. So, without further ado, let's analyze my blood work and see where we are now after 4 weeks of vegetables only. And when I say 4 weeks vegetables only, that's 6.5 days a week. I have a relationship, I have a wife, and I like to go out 2 meals per week with my wife and eat whatever I desire. And, it's still reasonably healthy. Sandwiches, hamburgers, and sushi is predominantly what we had over the last 4 weeks. A nice sandwich lunch, and maybe a hamburger or sushi for dinner. So I still got a little bit of carbohydrates, I still got a little bit of fat, and I still got a little bit of protein 1 day a week. My body weight went down, to below 90 kilos, and the muscularity is now, this is where we're at. I'll give you guys a little bit of a bicep shot. I will do the before and after when I start continuing with my bodybuilding journey again, and I will show you what I'll probably be like 88 kilos in 2 weeks. I'll show you what 88 kilos after coming off PEDs looks like compared to 88 kilos at the peak of my natural limit, basically. I think I could have gained another 2 kilos and ended up at around 90 kilos, probably 15, 17% body fat. But after 11 years of drug-free bodybuilding, I just wanted to see what the fuss was all about. I was getting a little bit impatient about this anabolic androgenic steroids that were out there and basically screaming at me. Take me, bro. It's been 10 years. When are you going to take me? Anyway, let's get into the blood work, starting with the urinalysis. I'm recording this not from behind my desk because that room is way too echoey. So I got all the blood work here on my phone. Let's go over that right now. My urinalysis is pretty unremarkable as always. Specific gravity is low at the bottom of the reference range because I drank, I think, almost 2 liters of water because I always like to rule out dehydration on my blood work. So a way to see that is by specific gravity being low. pH is 6.5, somewhere in the middle, so not too acidic, not too basic. Nothing in my urine, no protein, no blood, no nitrites, no ketones, no urobilinogen, no bilirubin, no leukocytes, and the white blood cell count, red cell blood cell count, and the bacteria are pretty low as well. So I always recommend everybody to do a urinalysis while they go in for blood work to see if they were properly hydrated and their kidney values are not completely skewed because they didn't drink enough. Or to assess if there's blood or protein in the urine, which is, unfortunately, I'm seeing that more and more often. So please, guys, stay off the Trimboloni sandwich because it's not very, conclusive or helpful for kidney function and kidney health. Let's move on to the complete blood count. So after the last 5 months, I've seen my complete blood count or my red blood cells and hematocrit slowly get less and less and less. So now I'm at 40% hematocrit. My hemoglobin is a little bit low because my hematocrit is low, but my red blood cells is still, borderline in range at 4.33 million cells per square meter, I believe. So hematocrit is 40%, and it's been very noticeable that digression of hematocrit and red blood cells after I took the Primobolan out and did my post-cycle therapy. So I noticed that I was getting more winded and more fatigued in the gym. And now obviously I haven't trained in 4 weeks because why go to the gym when you're not eating protein or a significant amount of calories? So I've been doing cardio. I was thinking about adding in an altitude mask, to help increase my hematocrit concentrations. But considering that I'm about 2 weeks out of rejoining my bodybuilding journey and going back to the gym, I'm pretty sure that the hematocrit will start to go back up when I take a couple sets to failure. Let's move on to chemistry. You see that my serum glucose concentrations are 74 milligrams per deciliter, still in range. And that's after 6 days, 7 days of fasting mimicking. So, serum glucose concentrations will stay in range because you always get a little bit of gluconeogenesis. Now, in my case, the gluconeogenesis is coming from perhaps a little bit of protein that's being broken down in the muscle, or the glycerol backbone from the stored body fats. And, I lost a tremendous amount of body fat over the last 4 weeks. Part of that is the caloric restriction. Part of that is the cardio. Part of that is the pharmacology that was involved. The SR9009, GW1516, clenbuterol growth hormone. It's all very lipolytic. And that has contributed to a good amount of fat loss. And, the glycerol backbone and whatever protein I was leaking from my skeletal muscle has been converted into glucose. So, serum glucose 74 milligrams per deciliter. I've been checking my fasting glucose and glucose during the day while running liraglutide, the GLP-1 receptor agonist. And I never saw my glucose concentrations drop below 70 milligrams per deciliter. Usually after a meal of vegetables only, it would go up to like 75, sometimes even 80 milligrams per deciliter. So never at any point in time during this fasting mimicking diet did I experience hypoglycemia. My BUN, as expected, with non-existent protein intake is only 10.2 milligrams per deciliter. My creatinine, 1.01 milligrams per deciliter, which is the lowest I've seen in almost a decade. Really. And I did my blood work 2 weeks ago, and then my creatinine was about 1.2 milligrams per deciliter. So I'm really looking forward to see my creatinine drop down below 1 milligrams per deciliter, let's say 2 weeks from now when I do my final blood work at the end of this fasting mimicking diet. Hopefully I can get it down below 1. And it's been, pretty much 15 years since I've seen that very, very low because my creatinine has always been a little bit elevated. And it's been getting higher and higher as I gained more muscle mass. Now, I'm hoping this is just bro science, but stick with me. There's 3 sources of energy production, right? You have one being protein, one being carbohydrates, and one of them being fatty acids. Now, I'm hoping that this fasting mimicking diet is able to somehow reset ATP synthesis coming from fatty acids, and not only from carbohydrates and not, from protein. So in my case, because I've been doing a ketogenic diet with reasonably high protein intake, I always felt that I get a lot of ATP synthesis from protein sources. And I would notice that if I were to drop my protein intake, I would not be as full and strong and, muscular looking. So I've always been doing high protein intake. And part of that, I'm sure, was being recruited for ATP synthesis and energy production, resulting in disproportionately elevated creatinine concentrations. Now, I said some of my family members for blood work, and that shows that I had elevated or, slightly elevated creatinine concentrations as well. But when, you do a 24-hour urine collection test and you check your inulin clearance or your Cystatin-C concentrations in the bloodstream or in the urine, I always saw that they were normal. And the glomerular filtration rate came back around 97 to 105%, depending on the test and, how it was performed. So, just because I saw elevated creatinine concentrations, and maybe some of you guys see elevated creatinine concentrations, it's probably indicative that you have insane amount of muscle mass, or you're using a little bit more creatine phosphate for ATP synthesis, resulting in more creatinine. So keep that in mind. Always check your Cystatin-C, which I did at this blood work. Unfortunately, it's going to take another 5 days or so before I get my Cystatin-C results back. I'm going to guesstimate that it's around 7 or 0.7, somewhere at the middle top of the reference range. That's usually where it's at. I've been seeing my Cystatin-C concentrations decline over the last few years after I've been using astragalus root extract. You can buy that at gorillamind.com. Use discount code Vigorous for 10% off. I've been running their astragalus root extract for, as long as it's been in our product list. And I'm expecting that my Cystatin-C levels are, somewhere at the middle, maybe slightly over the middle of the reference range. In range, indicating normal kidney function. I'll post that down below once I get the results, because I won't be able to update this video because you guys have been slamming me with DMs on, this fasting mimicking diet and how it's been going so far. CPK, or uric acid, 4.1 milligrams per deciliter. So even though I'm doing fasting mimicking diet, my uric acid is not alarmingly high. Now, in some cases where you do fasting or fasting mimicking, uric acid levels go up significantly. They will come up out of the reference range. I've seen that, 7.5, 9 milligrams per deciliter. But in my case, my uric acid isn't really elevated at any point in time. Perhaps because I'm also staying hydrated all the time and do my blood work hydrated. CPK, creatine phosphate kinase, 420 baby. Still elevated because I'm running clenbuterol and I'm doing daily, let's say medium high intensity cardio on the elliptical machine because I do like to work on my cardiovascular endurance. And of course that means an elevated heart rate stimulated by clenbuterol, and that means a little bit more CPK in the bloodstream than normal. Now I've seen it as high as 5,000 units per liter the day after a heavy leg day, and that's with, a significant amount of ubiquinol to support heart function. But yeah, CPK will always be elevated if you, do some sort of moderate to high intensity training. Lipase 77. I just wanted to test that to see if that's disproportionately elevated, to see if my beta cells of the pancreas are functioning correctly. It's in range, albeit a little bit at the top of the reference range. Could has to do with the glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonists that I'm taking. The liraglutide, again, they work on the beta cells of the pancreas and promote insulin secretion, but lipase and glucagon are basically opposing hormones to insulin and amylin secretion. So it's at the top of the reference range. I will keep my eye on it. C-reactive protein, nice and low, 0.4 milligrams per deciliter. I wanted to check my D-dimer to see if that was elevated, to see if I had COVID at, within the last year with, judging from my D-dimer concentration, it's not elevated, so I'm going to assume that I've been COVID-free so far. Gamma GT, a true indication of liver health to see if you get any true liver damage. So it's only 9 IUs per liter, which is very, very low. I think it's usually around 12 to 15 in my case. But now it's only 9 IUs per liter. And, coffee and carnitine intake both help with that. And I'm always on top of my coffee intake, so I think that contributes. So there's no real liver damage, but there is some fat in my liver. Hopefully it's pretty much gone at this point in time. But we'll see that in 2 weeks from now when I do the ultrasound. Lipid levels, cholesterol 138 milligrams per deciliter, triglycerides 45 milligrams per deciliter, and HDL, LDL are in a 1-to-1 ratio, 65 milligrams per deciliter. Now, I'm taking citrus bergamot, 1,000 milligrams per day, 10 milligrams ezetimibe per day, I'd still take my fish oil supplementation, so you get a little bit of fat from that, which helps with cholesterol concentrations as well. I'm doing my daily cardio. I'm sure the GW15016 is contributing. So the laundry list of things that I'm doing to have favorable cholesterol concentrations is extensive. Don't worry, I'll make a separate video about that in the future. Let's get into the meat and potato of this video, and that's the liver function test. And now it's all in range. Total protein 6.8 grams per deciliter, albumin 4.2 grams per deciliter, globulin 2.6 grams per deciliter. The ratio between albumin and globulin is 1.6. In range, total bilirubin 0.34 milligrams per deciliter, direct bilirubin 0.50 milligrams per deciliter, AST 22 units per liter, and ALT 17 units per liter, which is very, very close to where I want it. I want it between 10 to 15. And judging by the rate of progression or, reduction of the liver enzymes, I would say I'm 2 weeks out, maybe 2.5 weeks. And then they should be around 10 to 15 units per liter. Then I can really take a breather. Finally, but I will do my blood work in the morning 2 weeks from now and then go do the ultrasound right after. But I'll probably get the ultrasound results before I get the blood work results because that takes about a day, half a day. And the ultrasound results are pretty much immediate. I can ask the sonographer right when I'm laying down and I got all this jelly on my stomach. How does it look? And then hopefully I'll get some good news and I said, oh, it looks pretty good. The echosonicity is 100% as it should be for a healthy and functioning liver. Man, I can't wait for that result. Alkaline phosphatase is 80 units per liter, so probably because I'm staying on top of my zinc intake. My serum iron is finally back in range about 6 weeks after discontinuing my 200 grams of beef per day experiment in an attempt to increase my hematocrit. So I think back then it was like 199 or almost 200 micrograms per deciliter, and now we're at 136 micrograms per deciliter. My ferritin is also in range. I think I ended up at 450 nanograms per milliliter. And if I'll overlay that previous blood work from a couple of weeks ago so you can see how high my serum iron and my ferritin levels ended up at, 1 month of reintroducing beef to my diet. Now, when it comes to ferritin, it's another marker of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So for the guys out there that see their liver enzymes chronically elevated and perhaps their triglycerides a little bit higher than they liked it to be, another marker of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is ferritin, which I learned a little bit later on. Now, my ferritin and serum iron were always in range because I was doing a pescatarian diet for most of the last few years. I did a carnivore diet. My serum iron and ferritin were, legendarily out of range. Then I went back to a fish, salmon, whitefish, salmon, and eggs diet, chicken a little bit here and there. And the only beef I would get was, once a week in the form of a steak, ground up, fried on the grill, maybe add a little bit of bacon, sliced cheddar cheese, an egg, in between a nice broiled bun, some butter. I'm getting hungry, guys. Even on liraglutide, I'm still getting hungry, and I'm looking forward to a hamburger, which I will have this Sunday, 100%. So that would be my only beef intake once a week, and chicken intake is probably once a week also, in the form of a sandwich. So chicken and beef once a week, but whenever I would add beef to my diet on a daily basis, my serum iron ferritin would be pretty high. And one of the reasons being a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which keeps your ferritin elevated for a pretty long time. So even though it was elevated about 6 weeks ago, now it's finally back in range at 357 nanograms per milliliter. And while I was talking, I'm sure you noticed that my growth hormone is incredibly high at 117.05 nanograms per milliliter, which the test was high and repeated. They actually gave me a call, said, Steve, why is your growth hormone so high? And I'll explain. I don't have a pituitary adenoma, but I did administer 2 units of Norditropin intravenously to assess if my growth hormone was of the utmost potency. And I would say that's a bingo. Yeah, so 5 minutes before drawing blood, 2 units of growth hormone intravenously should give you a comparable result if it's pharmaceutical grade. So I don't want to waste 10 units of pharmaceutical grade growth hormone and then, do the timing correctly. 2 hours, you do 10 units intramuscularly 2 hours before drawing blood. And if you're off by 10 minutes, you get a conflicting result. And maybe the highest you'll see is like 30 to 33 nanograms per milliliter. So this is a much cheaper approach to check the potency of the growth hormone, albeit a little bit more invasive. Again, it's not for everybody, but it is certainly a good measuring assessment to see the potency of your growth hormone. I also tested my serum IGF-1 concentrations to see if 2 units of growth hormone per day, not intravenously, I do that subcutaneously right now before fasted cardio. But I also wanted to see where my serum IGF-1 concentrations were at after taking the metformin out, 4 weeks of metformin, 500 milligrams before bed, dropped my serum IGF-1 concentrations to 70 nanograms per deciliter, or 70 nanograms per milliliter. So I wanted to see where my serum IGF-1 concentrations are at. Unfortunately, that's, an outsourced test as well. So it'll take about a week or 2 weeks before that's ready. And I will list it down below next to the Cystatin-C results once I get that in. So it might be another week or 2 before I know where my serum IGF-1 concentrations are at. Let's move on to the other hormones. Estradiol, 21.3 picograms per milliliter. Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone around 3 to 3.6 milliIUs per milliliter. Very nice. Although my testosterone has come down from 515 nanograms per deciliter to only 375.26 nanograms per deciliter. But that's to be expected when you restrict all dietary fat intake, protein intake, carbohydrate intake, and, have a pretty low caloric intake for weeks on end. You can expect your testosterone concentrations to crash. So my estrogen came down a little bit and my testosterone came down. But you know what came up? Sex hormone binding globulin, which is very common when you restrict calories for prolonged periods of time. 2 weeks ago, it was 120 nanomoles per liter, and now it's 112 nanomoles per liter. I just feel just as horrible as 2 weeks ago. Well, not horrible, but, sex drive and, non-existent. So 2 weeks ago, it was 120 nanomoles per liter, but my testosterone was a little bit higher, and my estrogen was a little bit higher. So my free testosterone and my bioavailable testosterone 2 weeks ago were subclinical, and right now they're subclinical. So I can't wait to end this fasting mimicking diet. Luckily, I have a very supportive and understanding partner who still finds some sort of way to motivate me to get the job done. So, sex hormone binding globulin 112 nanomoles per liter, which is legendarily high. But there's a lot of potential for androgen delivery by the time I get back on cycle. And look at it that way. So there's something to say for it, and I expect to literally explode by the time I increase my calories. Hopefully that's not fat. Hopefully that's only muscle mass. So I expect to make significant progress within the first 4 weeks of going back to the gym, because all this testosterone, whatever's left, I don't expect my testosterone to decline any further, because 2 weeks ago was, comparable to where it is now. And my sex hormone binding globulin is comparable to where it is now. So by the time I get back into the gym, I start increasing my calories again. all of the sex hormone binding globulin will start delivering testosterone to tissue and hopefully help with anabolism. And if it stays elevated around 100 nanomoles per liter or 80 nanomoles per liter, or goes back to 60, 70 nanomoles per liter where it was before I started doing this fasting mimicking diet, that's a lot of potential to deliver androgens to tissue. Again, I expect it to go down when I increase my calories again. And let's say it stays elevated, out of the reference range for men, around 70 nanomoles per liter. Once I reintroduce the anabolics, you're going to see something else. But I will document that journey here on YouTube and Instagram for you guys to see what happens when you ride the gain train all the way back up. Now, I also wanted to check my thyroid levels. I'm still on 100 micrograms of T3 because I'm generously supplementing exogenous growth hormone, 2 IUs per day. So my T3 is somewhere in the middle of the reference range, free T3 in the middle, T4 close to the top of the reference range. That's to be expected when you're supplementing, and free T3 is also pretty much in the middle. TSH is nice and low, where I like it. I don't want my TSH to be out of range. So I just wanted to see if my metabolism would take a beating with this fasting mimicking diet, which apparently it doesn't. It's all nice where it should be. Again, I'm staying on top of my vitamin K, selenium, and iodine intake. I'm still making sure I get some iodine in my diet by adding a little bit of table salt to my salads. Yeah, I know it sounds nasty, but dipping pickles in table salt, iodized table salt, is surprisingly tasty. Again, I'm getting pretty hungry, so you have to be creative. And besides mustard, there's not much condiments I can choose from right now. So my metabolism is still going strong, going well, good enough, I would say. And at the end of this fasting mimicking diet, I see that my hemoglobin A1c went down from 4.9% to 4.7%. Now, normally it hovers around 5%, 4.9%, because, I'm not eating so many carbohydrates. And now I'm basically eating no carbohydrates or no direct sources. I could calculate it, how much carbohydrates I take, but I doubt it's over 50. Considering that vegetables are pretty much fiber and fiber alone. And then a lot of cellulose, which, maybe it is carbs, but does it digest and gets absorbed as glucose? Who knows? I highly doubt it because I see no fluctuations in my glucose concentrations when I check my glucose at any point during the day. So, hemoglobin came down a little bit, hemoglobin A1c, but that's, of course, a measuring tool for a 90-day average, and now it's been only 4 weeks, so that's only 1 month, 30 days. So let's see if it drops any further 2 weeks from now. I will check it again. So far, so good. Obviously, I'm not happy with my reflection dropping down so much weight, but I understand that it's just a temporary phase that I need to go through. And honestly, it's, again, these kind of things are good for character building, because even though I feel like I'm ready to start eating again, I'll push it with another 2 weeks and enjoy the fat loss that comes along with this fasting mimicking diet. Because I'm basically back to, comparable body fat levels to what I had before I started my post-cycle therapy. Because during the post-cycle therapy, I was in a, steep caloric surplus, which again, could have detracted from the resolvement of the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Because I was doing a ketogenic diet and, of course, fat intake, if it's 110 grams of fat per day, all the fat that is entering the liver might prevent the resolvement of the fatty acids and the triglycerides, which are stored within the liver. So now that I've been excluding fat from my diet, I lost a significant amount of body fat. Unfortunately, my testosterone concentrations went down with it. Again, it's always a trade-off, guys. And, I could introduce like ACG at this moment in time to bring my testosterone back up. But, you see that my luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone are still comparable to before I did the fasting mimicking diet. So honestly, I don't want to fuck with it. I just want to leave it alone. And whatever testosterone it ends up being, that's what it will be. I'm sure we'll come back up when I increase the calories and add a little bit of protein, carbs, and fats back into my diet. You know, so it's honestly, it's not a big deal, guys. I know you guys are probably cringing at these testosterone concentrations, but it's not the end of the world, really. There's more to life than having low test, which can easily be resolved by going on hormones, obviously, or making, some dietary changes. So hopefully 2 weeks from now, this journey is over. Fingers crossed, double fingers crossed. I want you guys to cross your fingers with me. That's a potential for thousands of crossed fingers. And hopefully 2 weeks from now, I have some good news. And then I'll post my pictures at, whatever kilograms I'll end up being, so you guys can see how much muscle I lost and what the starting point is of the gain train. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you find it informative. For the guys that are thinking about a fasting mimicking diet, it's tough. It's not easy. Again, part of that is mentally walking past the mirrors and literally see yourself shrinking on a day-to-day basis. That's tough. It's not very enjoyable, I'll tell you that. It's tough because you'll be hungry. It's tough because at certain points during the day, you'll lose focus and are not as cognitive. Luckily, it's only 12 o'clock here right now. But at 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, it's a steady decline of cognition, and I start to get a little bit fatigued and anxious because I want to eat something. And then even when you slam a big bowl of salads, I still want to eat something, even though I'm still on liraglutide, 1.2, and some days I have to push it to 1.8 milligrams because the hunger is getting more and more each day. So think about it carefully before you start doing this. And again, prevention of a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is the best cure, because the journey has not been easy. It hasn't been fun, but it's been a very good learning experience for myself and hopefully for some of you guys as well. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find the ebooks on my website, VigorousSteve.com/shop. Links down below. Follow me on Instagram at VigorousSteve. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. Cross your fingers and press that like button. Make sure it's the like button and not the dislike button. If you hit the dislike button, I forgive you. I understand that some people are on growth hormone and press the dislike button by accident because their, thumbs or index fingers are hypertrophied to the max. And I know those buttons are, the like button and the dislike button are very close together when you watch this video on your mobile phone. Did I forget something? Oh yeah, if you're looking for personalized advice, you can find the rest of my services in the services section. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Well, I'll see you guys in the next video, but in 2 weeks from now, will be hopefully the last NAFLD update video. See you in the next one.